one, so we need to change the name later on.
Okay.
Look, I know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
And no nation which expects to be the leader of other nations can expect to stay behind in this race for space.
What does it take to convince you that the dead do not always rest in peace?
Welcome to Three Beards Podcast. My name is Craig. This episode has been brought to you by Broad's Beard Care, premium beard care products made here in Central Florida by the master craftsman Kelly Brott. Go to broadsbeardcare.com, use promo code 3beards, capital B, and you're going to save 20% off. And at this time, along with Chris Viking Austin, we would like to welcome in our guest, Matt Adams. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, guys. How are you?
Wonderful, wonderful.
Really, really good. It is, first off, I want to thank you for just on the fly showing up and helping us out with a last minute ad. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, anytime, guys. Thanks for having me.
So what I'll let everybody do is just, I didn't have any time to really prepare everybody for it. We lucked out, and we've got two people that talk about megalithic structures back to back. We just had Dennis Stone on, and now we've got you. And I'm looking at your website real quick, and you've got a picture of, I think it's called Tripod Rock on the site. Yeah, and that, once again, looks like a megalithic one that is in. You guys have it titled as a possible summer solstice marker. Now, kind of to jump off our last episode to this one, does that line up with the American Stonehenge site?
I don't know what you mean by line up per se, because
like a ley line.
I don't know what a ley line is. So
okay,
I'll take any 2 points. You can connect any 2 points with one line, right? No matter where you are. So I don't really ascribe to that. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's not true. It's not.
Okay.
Ley lines per se is not my area of investigation. But what you mentioned about the summer solstice alignment, that's partly true with Tripod Rock. So Tripod Rock, it seems to be sort of like what Dennis's site is. Now, if anyone heard Dennis talk about his site is America's Stonehenge, and it's a hilltop that has certain stones that are propped upright, and they mark the solstice and equinox days, and I think some cross-quarter days like Samhain, May Day, and other days like that. So there is an alignment to the summer solstice sunset next to Tripod Rock. And so what do I mean by that? Researchers thought that if you stood in a certain place and you looked between two boulders, that the sun on the summer equinox sunset summer solstice sunset would set in between those two stones. And it did, and it still does. However, on the opposite, like just past those two boulders, those two big boulders, there's a drop off and a valley, and then there's another ridge, another mountain. And on that other mountain was another stone and a large boulder about the size of a house. And those two boulders were propped up with that boulder in the middle so that the summer solstice sun would set exactly on top of that giant boulder on the next mountain.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it wasn't just one thing or two things. I don't know if they placed that larger boulder on the next mountain. They definitely placed those two boulders next to Tripod Rock. And we know that because there are stones underneath that are placed to keep them propped up where they are so that they don't roll or tip or fall over a different way.
And that one, is that the one that's 130 tons?
That one I think is more like 180 to 200. That one is
God.
the largest I've ever seen. I think it's the largest in all of the Americas. And that's really saying something.
And that, you know, kind of just like what we talked about in the previous one with this one too. Now, obviously, based off it doesn't geologically, it doesn't line up to where you've got where this one could be natural erosion. You know, just there's no way for that based off what I'm looking at in the picture. So, what is the hypothesis? What is the thought right now of who possibly made this feature?
Yeah, so I had the luxury of actually getting a real geologist out to this site earlier this year in March for the equinox, because what I discovered after going through this 40-something-year-old field report and just like, oh, they said they found this, let's see if I can find that. And some of the things that they found I could not replicate. So I had different findings. Now it's not due to me being anybody special. It's due to it's due to us having technology today that they didn't have back then. Google Maps, for instance, you could very, very easily draw a line on top of, tripod rock to see there's a ridge on top of that boulder, right? A triangular ridge, and it goes down the whole length. They thought it pointed north, and they thought it went through, or it pointed to a pass in between that next mountain that I just was talking about. Mm-hmm. It actually doesn't. It points to the highest spot on the next mountain, which is interesting in and of itself. But that's what they thought 40 years ago. They just didn't have an easy way to test it to see if that was true. So nowadays, using something like Google Maps, you zoom in on top of tripod rock, you draw that line. Lo and behold, it's not there. It doesn't go through where they thought it did. So anyway, I was at the site. I was looking around. One of the first people I started hanging out with when I got into this stone stuff taught me to look for stone seats, a place where you could sit comfortably and make an observation. And so while I was at that site, you heard me mention earlier, researchers thought that if you stood in a particular spot, you would see that summer solstice sunset. I didn't understand why they would stand in that particular spot. That didn't seem to make any sense to me. So I looked around, and literally 180 degrees behind me was an actual stone seat. It's a boulder that was split into three. And there's like a V in the middle, and you put your feet in that, and then higher up you can put your butt on one side, and then the other piece you put your butt on that. And when you shift where you sit, you're facing different directions. So if you sit on one part of that, you're facing the summer solstice sunset alignment, and when you shift to the other part, you can look for the winter solstice sunset alignment. So I found a winter solstice sunset alignment there too. Now, here's where things start to get a little crazy. Tripod rock, from that seat, like on top of it is where the equinox sun will set, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything because tripod rock is pretty big, right? So for maybe 2 to 3 months, the sun is going to set on a different place on top of that every different day. All right. So the actual spot where the sun sets is going to be, somewhere throughout there within 1 or 2 months. Right. So no big deal. But I told you about this triangular crest that goes on top of it. Right.
Yeah.
I looked at that from the side. Okay. Not from like head on where you just see the triangle, but from the side where you see the top of the ridge. And I shit you not, there's what looks like to me the profile of a man's head and face looking straight up as if he's looking up into the sky. And there's even an eye notched into it. You can see the forehead, the eye, the nose, and the mouth. and then sort of like an indistinguishable body. And that's up on top of this, 180, 200 ton stone perched on top of 3 small boulders underneath. That's why they call it tripod rock. So now we've got one seat, one place where you can make 3 different observations on 4 different days of the year. The equinoxes repeats like in March and September, right? So,
Oh yeah. Did you get a photo of that by any chance? Were you able to get a picture of that? Show that face?
Oh yeah. I've got photos. Is there? If I sent it to you on Facebook right now, could you pull it up and show?
Oh
it?
yeah. No, dude. I'll
All
send it over
cool.
to us, and we'll bring it up.
Yeah. So
I'm trying to get it right now. So.
And then while you're
that.
doing that, I was going to ask you. One of the things we talked about with Dennis was some of these things, and as I'm looking at some of these sites that you visited, these, because you went to the, his site, the America Stonehenge, it looked like, and there's a couple other ones that have the same thing, like in Vermont, the lime kiln.
Yep.
And there's also in the stone walls, and you've got the Neshoba Valley Stone Chamber, and these all kind of have similar construction style to them, the way that the stones are stacked.
Yeah.
Bad.
And then I'll get that as soon as I get that figured out.
I'm looking at them, right? It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So anybody, I sent a link. I put the link up to the site. So if you guys want to view that too, it's NEHSSIE.com.
All right, Craig. I just sent you a bunch of photos, man. So.
All right, I've got them right here. I just sent them to Austin, so he'll be.
Yeah,
Cool.
1 minute. Hey,
Cool,
oh, Jesus, that's a lot. We'll do this.
Yep. So he brought those up. Now, what were one of those? So, kind of like in your thoughts too, where I mentioned to him. Do you think that some of these structures were more of an ancient culture, like Phoenician? I hypothesize of like Roman, Viking original structure, and then another civilization came on and added to what was currently there.
Yes and no. I, for a long time, thought, just simply because it's what I was introduced to, I believed in like the Celtic Druid idea. I believed in, maybe possibly the Vikings did some more stuff over here. I believed in the Carthaginians, Phoenicians, Romans, all of this stuff. Now, I'm not saying those folks never made it here. Okay? I'm not saying that, because there are some really weird artifacts that have been found that lends to the possibility that some of those people did make it here. But having traveled extensively to maybe over 140 sites now between Pennsylvania and Maine, I can say with an absolute certainty that there were only 2 cultures here in the country that could have possibly had, 1, the manpower to make all of these things out of stone, and 2, the time to do it. And those 2 would be the Native Americans and, post-colonial people, colonial and post-colonial. So the early European Americans. That said, strange things like the Newport Tower is still questionable. Who knows really who made that? Historians think they figured it out. There's a lot of questions around it. Again, with the artifacts, we've got L'Anse Meadows up in Canada. We know for a fact the Vikings were there. Viking artifacts and rune stones have been found in different places along the coast and even out in Oklahoma. And no one really knows who made those. And even the people that say it was a hoax don't know who made those. So that said, do I think that there were enough Vikings over here to have made a lot of these things? Absolutely not. I don't think they had the manpower. I really don't. If they were over here, they were not over here in the amount of people that it would have taken and the amount of time needed to get the job done.
Yeah, because obviously, I'm going to butcher the name on this one. It's the Rune Stone in Rhode Island. I think it's
Narragansett.
I want to. Okay, I would have butchered it. Thank you for saying that.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, obviously, you've got Norse, runes carved in this one, as well as the Bellows Falls petroglyphs in Connecticut River, Vermont. Obviously you've got an more of an ancient culture that's carved in there, but like you said, they weren't here supposedly long enough to build these structures. But for me, it's like typically, unless you get to the more towards the west and the southwest, you don't really have much of a use, or sightings of Indian cultures using stones and structures, other than individual things.
Not entirely true. There are stone walls out in California that people don't really have an explanation for as to who built them. They run for miles and miles. You've got the Pueblo people that built stone structures in Colorado, New Mexico.
Okay, yeah, you must have.
Yeah,
that's what I was saying. Like the south and the west, you see stone things, but in the northeast, that's typically not a stone structure. Use. Most of them were wood structures.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. You don't see a whole lot of stuff made out of stone unless you start to look, and then you start seeing a whole bunch of things. And when you do look, you find stone walls, stone piles. You find propped boulders, you find pointer stones, you find Manitou stones. I mean, I could go on and on and on about what the kind of things that you can find on. But what I really want to impress on people is the Native Americans had 12 to 15,000 years to build things. Now, when we hear that, I don't really think we understand that. So let me put it into perspective just a little bit. If I'll use the example of arrowheads. If an Indian lost one arrowhead a year, that's 15,000 arrowheads.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now, if there were 2 lost a year, that's 30,000 arrowheads. Okay. When we start to think about 50, 60, we're getting into the millions of arrowheads over 15,000 years of time. Okay. That said, we have to think about rises and falls of population. We know the Hopewellian people had a rise and fall of population. We know the Mississippians had a rise and fall of population. We know the Incas, Aztecs, and Mayans and what's the other one with the big heads? The Olmecs down in South America. They've all had rises and falls in population. So it was a very common thing for these tribes to get so big that they couldn't sustain themselves any longer, and they collapsed. And then in the early 1500s, when you introduce the Spanish and the English into the Americas, even whether, let's not even think about the violence that happened, right? But the sheer introduction of Europeans into the Americas, the contact between people brought the incidental transmission of disease. And that caused incredible amounts of death.
Yeah.
Unfathomable amounts of death. We think COVID-19 is something to be worried about. Regardless of what somebody's opinion is, let's look at, they had no defense against something that they didn't even know what it was in the early 15 and 1600s. Here in New England, we've got something called the Great Dying, and that happened in 1620, around that time. And that was the incidental spread of disease between the English and the Indians. All right. Now, if you read Charles C. Mann's book, 1491, it talks about how the Americas were prior to Columbus coming in 1492, and what the effects were of that. And he cites a lot of the research that was done in primarily South America that talked about the great amounts of people that perished due to disease. So much that their research couldn't even keep up with it. Now, that translates into tens of millions of people, all right, through the incidental transmission. Tens of millions of people, like maybe 50 to 100 million people. So now think about 500,000 miles of stone walls, 15,000 years to do it, and tens of millions of people to get the job done. That adds a lot of context that I'm not really sure why no one really wants to think about the Indians having done most of these things. Nature being one, I think, is we've had very powerful glaciers, right? Sound like Trump here. Very powerful. we had enormous amounts of ice that we really can't even comprehend what a mile of ice looks like, right? So when we think about tripod rock, can someone pull a full photo up of that so our listeners, viewers can know exactly what we're talking about? That's the Stone Sea. There we go. That's tripod rock. And you can see a human being off to the right of the photo. There I am. So, I mean, that's gigantic. And
Incredible.
It looks ridiculous, right? I mean, just the angle right there looks like it's going to fall over.
Yeah,
right?
You have some balls just to walk up to it without it. I would walk up and be like, that's going to follow me. There's no way.
Oh, I know. It's crazy.
Incredible.
Now, I got up on top of that, and I was doing some research and all that, and it doesn't move. It doesn't move.
How
right.
lucky it would roll over.
Right. I mean, I was afraid to get under it, and I know it's been sitting there for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, right? I had a geologist out at this site, and I want to relay what I learned from the geologist because I think it's important. A lot of people will discredit, or maybe not even discredit, but throw out anything from academic sources. I don't believe in that. I think academics have a very, very valuable mindset. They've got very valuable information, and I may not necessarily agree with everything that they say, but they're not always wrong. And we can't throw everything that they say out. A lot of people will do that. I used to do that, and I don't do that anymore. So this geologist told me that if there was a mile of ice, now we're looking at that photo. Imagine a mile of ice.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Imagine that 200-ton boulder completely surrounded by ice.
It's a pebble.
It's a pebble. Right. Exactly. We don't want to think about things in this way because it kills the mystery for us. We look at something like that when we're up close to it. We can't possibly comprehend how it was done. But if we choose to listen to some of these academics, they do have the right answers. So this particular structure, I am now entertaining the idea that, that was left there by a glacier. Because I can't really think of another way that would have been done by human beings. Look at the angle. All right. Look at where the stones are underneath it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely possible and very probable. I like to think in possibilities versus probabilities. It's very probable that a glacier left that there. Now, that said, if a glacier left that just like it is, fine. If the Native Americans saw it, what would they have thought of that? Mm-hmm. They wouldn't have understood glaciers like we do. So that right there would have been something sacred to them. Yeah. So whether or not they did it shouldn't matter. The fact that it's there and it is what it is lends to the possibility that they looked at it as a sacred site.
Yeah, it's one of those things too you were bringing up when you're talking about a lot of the Indian with the tribes. I kind of agree along those lines because you think about the Mayans, the Aztec, they were back there. So what's to say that an Indian tribe wasn't making these structures, and then when the Vikings came over, they died off. And so by the time English settlers come over, we're talking 200-300 years that this giant civilization may have died off.
Yeah.
So I could definitely see that as, definite possibility now. I wasn't even really thinking about it in that terms.
So you said the Indians did this, the Vikings came. What would the Indians use to make this? That's incredible.
Make what specifically? So we're looking at a different photo now.
Oh yeah, well this is a formation, like Craig said. The Indians made this formation. It's like how?
Right. So what I said was I don't think that they made that.
Craig, I think they made it.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So, it's just the way it's set up. It's like it doesn't make any sense.
I know. That's right. You see all these structures, and that's what I was saying. It's like it makes sense, like especially for that one for a glacier, and then the other ones then you makes you think a little bit more of like some of the other sites that if this was one, just like we were talking about, up there, America's Stonehenge one too. It's just like, so where did they get this ability to move these massive stones and place them in there? Because some of these locations, it would take a massive undertaking to get these stones into place.
Right. And again, look at the angle that's at. If they didn't get it right, a lot of people could get hurt, right? A lot of people could get hurt, and they'd have to start all over again from the beginning.
God.
Yeah.
So would they really think it was worth it if it fell and crushed a bunch of them?
I think it'd be more like you said, it was there from the glacier, and then this became a reverent site. Like this must have been, the gods. The gods placed this in here, and this has become a holy site.
Interesting.
Yeah. So if you want to go through some of the other photos that I sent, I'd love to walk you through what I see. Yeah. This one here is the stone seat that I talked about, and see that V in the bottom? That's where you put your feet. And if you put your butt on the, as we're looking at the photo on the left side, you look off to the winter solstice sunset. And if you sit in the middle and just dead on, you'd see the summer solstice. And if you shifted a little bit, then you'd be looking over the top of Tripod Rock. And I told you about the little silhouette of a man or shape of a man's face and the eye there. We'll get to that, but go to the next one. Let's go back to these because these are interesting.
Let's do this one. There's one you're talking about.
Yep. All right. So you can see the profile of the guy: the forehead, the eye, the nose, and then below the nose is the mouth. I don't know if that's entirely natural. I don't think it is. That eye looks to me like it had been pecked out. I couldn't get the geologist to get up on the rock. He's late in his career. He's been a geologist for 50 years. So getting him up on that rock wasn't happening. I really wanted his opinion on the eye specifically, so he could tell me if he thought it was worked. But it's an hour and a half hike in there, and I didn't have the strength to bring a ladder with me. So
couldn't give him the climb.
Yeah. So I'm the jury is still out on, my opinion. Do I think that was pecked or not? If it's not pecked, then it's a really, really big coincidence. Okay. Now go back to those other two pictures I asked you to come back to. Go to the square one first. No, go to the one next to it. All right. So what we're looking at here is a drone shot that I got in March of 2019. And it's kind of my habit to go there every equinox, right? So, and the bottom middle of the photo, that's Tripod Rock, okay? And I don't know if you can zoom in a little bit on that, but you can see the ridge that goes across the bottom.
Trying to... It's not zooming in, zooming out. That makes no sense. Yeah, I was having trouble loading it on my screen. I can't zoom in on it.
All right, so we'll skip over that. The thing that I want you to notice is, So opposite the green tree there, right? So look on the other side of Tripod Rock. Yeah, a little bit to where that arrow is. Go back to the rock that you see on the ground. Yeah, right there. All right, so at the end of that rock, at the top of it on the photo, that's the spot where the researchers thought that if you stood there and you looked over to the two boulders that are, how do I describe that? Let me look at the photo real quick. Essentially, you're going to follow a diagonal line from that sort of up to, well, it's tough to see, but they're to the top. What the hell is it? Top right of that green tree. They're tough to see, but essentially that's where they are. So they thought if you stood there and you looked over to those boulders, that you'd see the winter, summer solstice sunset, and you do. But I didn't understand why you would stand there at that rock. So behind that is where the seat is. It's off. It's not in the photo, but it's behind that. So now I want to call your attention to the weird shaped stone on the ground up in the top right of the photo.
One that kind of looks like a head.
Yeah. We've already seen those other images, right? Now, I think it's very, very, very strange coincidence that this looks like a profile of a head, and so does the profile on top of the boulder. To me, that seems like a really weird coincidence, right? And that's part of what I wanted the geologist to look at, okay? So when the geologist came up, I wanted him to say what his opinion was of these. Essentially, it's a group of stones that form that head. And there's a couple of tricks to that, they're getting played on the eye, on your eye when you look at it. So one of them is that it's not one stone lying flat. It's a series of stones. And where the two red lines are on the head, that's the eye. And below that, you can see like the nose, but you also see some splits in the stone. Now, the geologist was able to tell me what those splits were. That part of those stones was actually one stone. And when the glacier melted, it left the stone in an uneven position, and the stone was so heavy that it split into multiple pieces. So those pieces weren't placed there. And how do we know that? Because when metamorphic rock hardens from soft molten lava into stone, it forms in a particular pattern, right? And those are left as lines in the stone, okay? And so what a geologist does is he comes in and he takes a geologic compass and he takes multiple readings of these lines on the stone to figure out how how that stone was formed, okay? Now he can take anyway, he didn't take as much time as he could have normally, as like if he was getting paid to do it, he didn't do as many readings, but he didn't need to. He did enough, maybe 5 or 6, to show me like this is how the rock formed, and you can see here on this particular broken piece how it lines up with the piece below it and how that lines up with the next piece. So that was all one piece, and then we looked underneath it to see that, yeah, okay, there are some other things underneath that, and it caused the cracks. And those cracks start to play the tricks on your eye and make it look like we're looking at a head, okay? So one of the other things that I was looking at with this head was obviously what are those 3 green circles and what is the eye looking at? Those 3 green circles are propped boulders, small but big enough, probably a few 100 pounds each. And the last one in the line, the furthest away from the head, is actually another stone seat. And you can sit there, it's very comfortable. You don't feel like you need to get up or move. You can sit there and relax, and after an hour and a half hike in, it's a nice place to chill out. So initially, I took a reading from that seat. And I thought, well, actually, what I was doing was, you see that small black stone behind the head, about midway between? I can't
Yeah.
see the arrow, but so it's behind the green circle on the right edge of the photo. Another researcher thought that between that black stone and the stone seat, that there was a winter solstice sunrise. It doesn't work for a few different reasons. I'll skip the reasons, but it doesn't work. So I was there looking for that. Now, I didn't spot this stone head until months later after I'd gone home and I was looking at that big square image that we looked at a couple minutes ago. The drone shot, right? The full drone shot. I didn't notice that stone head until then. And so I had to refer back to the footage that I had of me looking for the winter solstice sunrise. Now, what I thought I caught was the equinox sunrise between the stone and the eye. And I sat on that for, however many months it was, maybe 8 more months until this year, 2020, when I was able to get there and get the geologist there and take some more readings. I thought I had an equinox sun alignment from that stone seat into that eye. When I got there that day, I was able to say that, nope, that's not actually there. It's close, but it's not there. So sometimes you have to sit on your findings and you can't let your imagination run wild. You really have to check and double check. And sometimes you've got to triple check to make sure that you're not making claims that, one, are untrue and you don't know because you haven't bothered to check. 2, you're not putting claims out there that are false, and then somebody can go check it and come back and say, no, that guy said something that's wrong and blah, 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 I proved him wrong and yada, 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 right? So you've got to be real careful. And I think what a lot of the earlier researchers have done was, and this is why people believe in, like you said at the beginning of the show, Phoenicians, Carthaginians, Egyptians, all these different folks, right? Why do they believe that that's true? Because somebody put something out there that they didn't thoroughly check, and they didn't take the time to actually put it out there. Now, there's a lot of good researchers out there, and they add a lot of valuable information, and there's a lot of theories. And I've talked to some of these old school people. I've talked to people in their 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s about what they think and who they think did it. And when you start to question them, and I got to throw this in here. I studied law on my own for 8 years. I learned how to question. Okay? So he who questions well learns well. He who differentiates well learns well. And I apply that to this field, and it works wonders. But when I start to question these old timers and start to try to understand their theories or what their thinking was at the time or why they believe what they believe, I run into a lot of things, a lot of ideas that just break down. There's a guy that I know, he's probably 90 now, and he was a surveyor, and he's a brilliant guy. He's a very, very nice guy. He's led me to different sites, and I truly value his friendship. But he had a theory about America's Stonehenge, Dennis's site. And I just happened to walk into a conversation that he was having during a conference. And he was surrounded by this group of people, maybe 20 people, and everyone was kind of captivated by what he was saying and his ideas and all of that. And his ideas just broke down so quick when people started asking questions. He thought that America's Stonehenge was like a tannery. All right. Now, I don't know if that's true or not true. And it's not for me to say that, but what I noticed was that when people started to ask him for evidence of that, he didn't have any. So you've got to be real careful what you say. You've got to do your homework. You've got to double, triple check all the time. And you've really got to make sure and put the time and effort into things before you start putting claims out there. You really have to question what you believe, because a lot of people don't know where these ideas got started. They don't know the origin of these ideas. And a lot of times, like, they don't even care. Now, real quick, just for instance, I don't care what people believe, but if you believe in giants, but you don't believe in the Bible, well, where do you think the giants theory came from in modern American, I don't know. It's not really archaeology, but a lot of those early investigators didn't have science to turn to, the field we know today as science. They didn't have that to turn to. And so they turned to the Bible for answers. And then the Bible told them, oh, well, I mean, they looked and saw, well, giants, right? So these skeletons that we're finding that appear to be, however tall, they must be giants. So if you believe in giants, but you don't believe in the Bible, you're kind of a hypocrite. And if you don't understand that that's where these ideas are coming from, you need to do some more research.
Well, and that's one of the things too. Is it's kind of where we were talking about, some of these structures. It's like I said, could it have been used as a tannery at one point? It possibly. I mean, because it's supposedly over 4,000 years old. So I mean, it could definitely have had multiple uses by cultures. But like the beginning ones, it was the same way like we brought up there, and kind of posed to you in the beginning, is where do you think some of these, do you think that there was influence from more of a medieval times? Because some of this construction almost matches perfectly what's found in the British Isles.
So I'd like to delve deeper into that. I would disagree with matches perfectly. When you look very closely at the construction of some of these things, they actually do not match. There are some similarities, but the earlier researchers, they were looking for things because they didn't know what these things were. They went looking for things that looked like this to try to explain it. Okay? Now, I wouldn't say that that's the best way to get an answer as to what something is. It's a start, and I could see why logically they would go there, but that's not the best way to start. And I think it did a disservice to what I think these things actually are. Some of them, I think, like the stone chambers I'm referring to specifically. Stone chambers, there's kind of two different kinds of them if you look. There are ones with really small openings, and then there are ones with larger openings that you could walk into. Some of these things you've got to crawl or worm your way into. Other ones you can walk right in. Other ones you kind of have to, you can walk in, but you're still in an awkward position and you're trying to wiggle your way in. And, for someone who thinks that they're all root cellars, you can't fit wheelbarrows into a lot of these things. For someone who thinks giants made them, try crawling into some of these things. Like, I can tell you, a giant would never be able to get into some of them. So, once you start seeing a lot of those, you come to that realization and you question that idea. So there's a couple of different kinds. And when you look at the construction, there are certain ways of working stone that were done by colonials and post-colonials, and Indians just didn't work stone that way. So when you recognize how those, or what those stone working types were, specifically we've got like flat wedge and plug and feather, and that's like chiseling into the rocks in different ways. We don't have time to go over that stuff. So for anybody who's really interested, look that up on YouTube, plug and feather and flat wedge chisels, and just watch a couple of videos that explain how that works. those tools leave behind specific looking marks. And when you see a mark like that in stone, that's a telltale sign of who did it and probably when. And how do we know when? Because when we look at buildings that were made at a certain date, we can see those markings in the stones that were used to build those buildings. So we know that technique was going on during that particular time. So some of those structures, like I said, once you see one of those stone marks, one of those stoneworking marks in it, you know, oh, okay, well, this is probably made by, or most definitely made by, colonials. If you don't see those things, well, you can't rule out colonials because you don't know that they didn't make it, but you begin to look for other things that might, you know, lean the scale in one direction as opposed to another.
Yeah. No, I get it. That's it was one of those. It's really cool because I've kind of always had this fascination, especially since we started learning about these structures, like where they came from, and I've always looked into that with research, where it's always important, whether you're talking about something just like this, looking at stones, whether it's paranormal. I mean, anything that you talk about, if you don't come in with a skeptical outlook on it, you're going to easily accept stuff just, you know, it's like, oh my God, it was built by a giant. These pyramids were built by UFOs. You just, you know, you go through, you'll come up with these outrageous things to how it is. But like you said, you look at it like that tripod rock, there's a highly great possibility that that was a glacial movement of that stone. Somebody came upon it and like, oh my God, how is this even possible? This is holy, you know, boom. You know, it was a reverent spot, where you get some of the other ones where it's clearly somebody stacked these to make an archway. I mean, and now we got to figure out who made this archway.
Right. So we're at a place where we don't always have solid answers for this stuff, right? And so I know I've mentioned that I weigh possibility versus probability, right? That's sort of where I'm at. And if I rule out that it's less of a possibility, and I only do that when I have an answer that's more of a probability, you know? So when we don't have answers, I believe that that's how we should look at it. I don't know how much time we have, but what do we got?
We got a couple more minutes, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, continue.
All right, so there's one important thing that I really, really want to get through to people who are interested in this kind of thing, investigating any kind of unknown. There's I guess, imagine like a bar graph, right? And you've got two bars on your bar graph, okay? And one of them's high and the other one is low. Can't do that for too long. I'm driving.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got two different ways of thinking here. We've got the ability to process. We've got a very high ability to process information, but we have a very low amount of information. And then the opposite is we have a very low amount of, or a very high amount of information and a very low amount of ability to process it. Okay? And if you don't balance those two things, if you don't balance your ability to process the information that you're looking at with the amount of information that you're looking at, you're going to believe in theories and conspiracies. Okay? And the way to do it is to keep those two things in balance. If you start believing things that are most likely not probable, then you need to come back into balance. And if you're looking at, like, you know, hey, the camera went off, the flash went off, and there's this little light being in my photo, it's got a wing, it's got to be a fairy. Okay, but I'm a photographer, and it's you shot a mosquito. That's good for you. Like, clap. You know, if you're interested in orbs and that kind of thing, you don't want to start investigating orbs. That's not where true orb researchers start. They start by understanding how their camera works and how photography works, right? That's the tool that supposedly produces these anomalies or captures these anomalies, right? So you have to learn the difference between when you're capturing dust particles and insects, rods, they're just flies that are captured at a very slow frame rate.
Yep.
You know, and they know that because they did the experiment with a very, very high frame rate, right? I don't know, forget what you call the camera, but camera with a very, very high frame rate. And what did they catch? They caught a fly. And so it looks really weird when you catch a photo of a fly at a very slow frame rate. It looks like a rod, and it's a mystery, right? No, don't look at the object. Look at the tool.
Yeah, my Ring camera pretty much looked like it caught Tinkerbell on the image at night. You know, all of a sudden you just see this bright light that just kind of jumping around, and it was just an insect flying in front of the Ring camera. And I was like, I could have posted that YouTube video and just been like, oh my God, I captured a fair,
right.
Yeah.
And when somebody comes along to debunk that, you look like the fool, right? So that's why you got to be real careful as to what you put out.
Well, it'd be like capturing a Mylar balloon up in the sky and thinking it's a UFO.
Jesus Christ! Don't start that.
That's a little inside joke for everybody.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't know if it's a Mylar balloon, isn't it a UFO?
Yeah, pretty much.
Doesn't mean it's aliens. It just means it's unidentified.
Exactly. And everybody thinks as soon as you say UFO, they're like, oh God, little green. No. It just means I don't know what it was. It's just flying in the sky. It's just same thing. It's like just because this stack of stones here doesn't mean that the Anunnaki traveled over in their levitating craft to make this structure over in North America and then flew back. No, it just means we have this really cool stack of rocks. Now let's figure out who built it.
Yep. So I'm driving around like playing GTA or GTA 5 here.
Well, that's what I figured. I was like, you either just scored some points or you hit a pothole, but I'm not sure.
I can tell you for a fact I just scored points.
There you go.
No.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
I was watching you drive also like going, oh God, I hope that was a pothole because I'm gonna feel terrible.
No, I must have hit 4 or 5 people on the way home. So
Okay.
Yeah, that's
time to ditch this car and get another one. Drive away.
No, sir, I really appreciate you coming on. I'm not sure how you guys pronounce your site. I just I don't know if you
NEHSSIE, like Loch Ness,
Yeah, NEHSSIE. I need everybody go check out the site because it's one of the ones like I was telling when we first started talking about this. You guys got the site you guys have built is really nice, by the way.
Thanks.
I really like the fact that you can scroll down there and you can check out these photos that you guys have up there. And not only do you, maybe Austin, I don't know if you can bring that up real quick and show them.
Yeah, attacking an insect.
Yeah, it's on the.
Hurry up, Ginger Squatch.
Yeah, it's on the very first. As soon as you log into that site, you scroll down almost to the bottom, you'll find it. But everybody, go to the site, check these things out. Obviously, if you can, donate to them, so that way they can go check these sites out and also help with the preservation of some of these locations. Because this is really, so just scroll down, keep going. You're gonna scroll. Yep, you scroll. Yep, right there. Now, right there, those pictures. Go. And when you click on those pictures, you'll see it tells you about the location.
That's cool.
Yeah, so like I said, it's a really impressive site. What you guys
Thanks, man.
Yeah, and so just click on that, and that gives you information on those locations. So if you're in the area, obviously, we just talked with Dennis Stone, and there's a set right there, Mystery Hill. So you've got multiple locations you could find out stuff about this. But Matt Adams, I cannot thank you again, sir, for coming on, talking with us. And I mean, we definitely have got different perspective on these stone monoliths, and what could be a possibility that it might have just been a civilization here in North America that died out, just as much as it could have been somebody that seafared, from the old world across the Atlantic to get here.
Can I plug 2 things before we go?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, please, by all means.
Awesome. Hashtag us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Follow us on whatever. A lot of people post stuff from all over, stuff that they're familiar with, and there's a lot of good content.
Yeah, we'll definitely get that.
YouTube.
We'll get yours. Yeah.
And you go to book. It'll be get
Here I'm going to copy
on, and then when the book is done, that will be delivered through that same portal into the website. So
Definitely.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to. Yep. Yeah, I know. I've got the book reading list. It's getting huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to copy some of these links down, and I said we'll put those out there for you too, and we'll get those in there so that way everybody can go there and check those out. Just like I said, book.NEHSSIE.com, and just go. Like I said, go to NEHSSIE.com, check that out. Show these guys, and we'll link everything to you guys on Instagram. It's the same thing, NEHSSIE. Pinterest. Go look at all these. Give these guys some support, and Matt, let you get into the family there, sir. And I really appreciate it, and we would love to have you on at another time.
Yeah.
You might be frozen.
The cops got him.
Yep. They caught up to him. He sat in one location too long. He didn't switch cars.
That's awesome.
All right. So I'll message him. I'll message him off there. So
It's right. Still shot.
they just
did they release him?
It's crazy. You would think that, I guess so. Driving around, you got better Wi-Fi, so that makes sense. But
Well, it's one of those things. If you get home, it might be trying to connect to your house. A lot of times
that makes sense.
you go from your data plan to your Wi-Fi, and that kills it. So.
I had better service at the lake than I do in my house. That's why I had to hurry up and run home to jump on the computer.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
thanks again. We'll link all that stuff for you. This episode brought to you by Broad's Beard Care.
Get
all
yourself
of us,
some.
Yep, all of us use it religiously. We're not just saying it; we all use it. Even fans of the show, they've started using it, and they highly recommend it as well. Go to broadsbeardcare.com. Check out our blend that Austin is blinking randomly at the show. You buy a bottle of that, not only are you supporting Kelly, you are also supporting us. And go to Nanny Cakes 407 on Facebook, or give her a call at 407-923-2898.
98.
And she will help you out, especially if you're in the Orlando area. That's going to be the easiest way to get there. Patreon.com/Three Beards Podcast. Become a member, and every time we come out with a new sticker, we're going to get one of those out to you. And it helps us out. It helps us upgrade stuff as we need it. And go to YouTube, like and share and subscribe, please.
And hit that bell.
Yep. Help get everything. Appreciate everybody watching. Thank you so much. Everybody have a great night. We will be back Wednesday.
Tuesday.
And Ginger Squash Sports will be on Tuesday, but the Three Beards Podcast Show will be back on Wednesday. So everybody have a great night, and we will see you next week. Good night.
Yeah.